Hurricane Sandy, a history-making weather event coming ashore this evening.
This will probably be easily called the storm of the century. I've tracked blizzards, I've tracked hurricanes, I've gone tornado chasing. Sandy was the most frightened I've ever been.
My sister called and said, Jenny, they're evacuating the hospital.
It was not something that you want to hear when your son is in intensive care.
Wires were coming down, trees were coming down.
I'm stuck and trapped, I cannot get out.
When I went to bed that night, I was just expecting my dad to come home the next morning. I had no idea our lives were about to change.
Well, there's a massive fire burning right now in a flooded section of Queens.
It literally was a firestorm in the middle of a superstorm.
I was scared out of my mind, asking God to please help us.
And it is an anxious morning for folks up and down the East Coast. Hurricane Sandy strengthened over the night.
In New York City, as early as tomorrow morning, officials will decide whether to shut down the subways, tunnels, and bridges.
I feel like at the point when Hurricane Sandy became newsworthy, it was really late in the game for us. We knew it was coming, but that was a busy time of life.
We had found out just 5 months after the birth of our first child that we would be expecting another. For us to have two kids 14 months apart was a little bit like distressing, but obviously very exciting. We had a fairly normal pregnancy until about the 20-week sonogram, and they were doing the anatomy scan.
We could kind of tell something was not right when there was a lot of silence, a lot of back and forth on the sonogram, just trying to get pictures. And so they walked out, and Jeremy and I kind of looked at each other, and they came back in and said, your son has a very serious heart defect.
And they said that the left side of his heart was basically undeveloped and was not going to develop. We sat down with the doctor. He was able to explain to us that it was a 3-surgery process, so we knew that there was a long and challenging road ahead for our little baby. William was born on October 8th. He had surgery on October 11th. He was in recovery at the hospital, and then Sandy came about 2.5 weeks after.
Good evening. Tonight, much of the East Coast is on high alert and sitting on a slow-motion collision course with what forecasters are calling a storm of historic dimensions.
Frankly, we weren't really keeping an eye on the weather during this stage, but it was not something that you want to hear from the hospital bedside, that a superstorm is headed your way when your son is in intensive care.
When it came to Sandy, this was the first time I'm aware of that we had used the term superstorm. It was a monster. Nobody had ever seen anything like this approaching New York City, and so we weren't prepared for anything like this.
Breezy Point is a very unique neighborhood. It does not feel like New York City. It's a beach community. We are surrounded by water on all 3 sides.
When I'm home, I feel like I'm in a totally different place. Manhattan is far away. The pressures of the city are far away. I lived in Breezy all my life. My grandparents grew up there. My parents grew up there. It's a special place where everyone knows everyone.
It's a civic-minded neighborhood. There's a lot of civil servants, whether they be teachers, nurses, firefighters, police officers, veterans, including myself. I was a member of the New York City Fire Department for 23 years.
Breezy Point has 3 volunteer fire departments located inside of it. We do it not for the credit or for the glory. We do it to help our neighbors. You're not going to let anything happen to one of your friends. The year prior, we had Hurricane Irene hit Breezy Point, and it was so minor.
We thought it was going to be really bad. We did everything possible to secure our homes. And then it was over in a few hours, and I think people were like, oh my God, we did so much work to get ready for it.
So going into Hurricane Sandy, we knew just from talking to people the night before, nobody was going to be leaving. Everyone was going to stay.
I don't think we all took it really that serious. that it was going to be that bad until like 24 hours before it really hit. The water was so angry and so dark. You just had this horrible, eerie feeling, different from other hurricanes, that you just knew this was something terrible was going to happen.
The center of the storm is going to hit landfall sometime this evening. We anticipate that there are going to be a lot of trees down, a lot of water, and millions of people are going to be affected.
My dad was a police officer in Wayne, New Jersey. On the day of Hurricane Sandy, it was any other day of him going to work. He was putting his uniform on, strapping his gun to his belt, and he would give us all a kiss goodbye on the head and tell us how much he loved us. And he left. I was always a daddy's girl. Growing up, they always say in elementary school, draw your hero, and it was always my dad in his police uniform, and I just always thought of him as my hero. Before my dad was a police officer, he was a firefighter. My dad made a lot of his best friends from Company 5 Firehouse, and they were a big part of his life.
Bobby Franco, he actually brought me into this firehouse. He was one of the guys that took me under his wing and brought me down here. I always looked to Bob as a mentor. The Wayne Fire Department is an all-volunteer fire department located approximately half an hour outside of New York City. We're a brotherhood. We look out for each other and take care of each other. Superstorm Sandy started out rather tame initially for us. You know, there was some light rain, some wind. As the night progressed, things just got much worse.
We knew it was going to hit New Jersey, but I don't think there was anything that could have prepared us for the full effect of what actually hit us. All of a sudden, just out of nowhere, a switch went off, and it just became chaotic. Trees were coming down, wires were coming down. We had gotten a call for a ruptured gas line because a tree had come down and it ripped the gas line right out of the ground. So we had a free-flowing stream of gas. We responded, got the people out, and mitigated the scene as best as possible. A while later, Bob Franco rolled up in his patrol car, and we were having a conversation. I see out of the corner of my eye this image just come out of the darkness. And I yelled to Bob, "Tree, get down." And then came the crashing and the banging.
85 to headquarters, urgent. The tree is falling on top of my car and a patrol car. I'm stuck and trapped. I cannot get out.
We've just gotten word from the National Weather Service that Sandy has now made a northwest turn, headed directly for New York City.
My wife was 3 months pregnant and my son had just turned 2. We hunkered down in my parents' house together with my whole family. My parents' house is right off the bayside. We figured that we'd be okay there, but things started to rapidly deteriorate.
At about 6:30, maybe a little bit later, we started to see water wrap around both sides of the firehouse. And at that time, we knew it was time to really start getting ready. We did not anticipate what was coming.
It was dark out, and we smelled smoke. Now, at first, I just thought it was a car fire, but then one of the people staying in the house with us observed the glow that was off in the distance. Couldn't conceive that it was, in fact, the incipient stages of what would become the largest residential fire in New York City's history. We are in serious trouble here.
This freakishly powerful October storm will go down as one of the most colossal weather events of its kind of all time.
The storm is moving faster now. That means the worst conditions are coming a lot more quickly now to the area. So just stay indoors now. Now's not the time to venture out unless it's an absolute emergency for you.
I've never seen anything like that before. It was a tremendously large storm, between 900 and 1,000 miles wide. So you had all kinds of weather happening in a lot of different areas.
We started to get reports in. We heard about the flooding in New Jersey. And This picture of devastation was really starting to come in.
A5 to headquarters, urgent. The tree has fallen on top of my car and a patrol car. I'm stuck and trapped. I cannot get out.
Both vehicles were completely covered by the tree. You know, I first didn't know if I was alive or not. The roof of my vehicle caved in on me. I was stuck. And then I was able to see on the passenger floor the radio mic.
The roof of my car is completely on top of me, crushed. I have a patrol unit next to me. I do not know the situation of the officer. His car was crushed as well.
I was calling out to Bob to see if I heard anything, and I didn't know if Bob was alive or if he was no longer with us.
Chief 5 to headquarters, dispatch companies 2 and 5. Starting at least 3 ambulances, 2 ALS units.
When I went to bed that night, I was just expecting my dad to come home the next morning. I was 12 years old, and I just had no idea how this would change my life.
When the storm arrived to New York City, William was 2.5 weeks after his first surgery, and he was about 3 weeks old at the time. There's really nothing as a parent more taxing than being at a hospital bedside, right? And looking at your child and knowing that there's nothing you can do for him. On the day of Hurricane Sandy, we had spoken to the nurses, and they said, hey, there's no better place for him to be. We have power and backup power and backup power. This is the safest place for your child to be. In fact, they encouraged us to go home and be with our 14-month-old.
So we both went back to the apartment and left William there. But then a couple hours later, it was about 10 or 11 at night, the power had gone off. My sister called and said, Jenny, they're evacuating the hospital.
Evacuations are underway at NYU's Langone Medical Center. Officials say that the hospital's backup power system has failed.
We didn't believe her because they had reassured us that they were going to be able to keep the critical care babies there.
So we called the hospital and found that the phone call just didn't even register on the other end. There was no connection with NYU Langone, and we thought that was pretty odd. And certainly at that point, our first time leaving the bedside, it was a pretty stressful thing.
We knew that one of us should be there because at that point we knew that the storm was bigger.
And so the plan became that I would walk through a hurricane to the hospital about 10 blocks away and try to find a way to get to my son.
We want to talk about the fire in Rockaway that's happening right now. The FDNY has said this is now a 5-alarm fire in the Breezy Point section of Queens, and at least 15 houses are on fire here.
My husband left for work that day. He's an NYPD sergeant in the scuba division. I didn't know what he would encounter that night, so I was scared for all of us, and especially for my husband. Then I went to his parents' house to be with them, which is a mile down the road. And we're upstairs, just watching the winds. We could see the flames from the upstairs bedrooms. And we just didn't know how far and widespread that flame was. Could it be our houses, where it was? It was, you know, you looked out the window, but you really couldn't tell. I mean, it was surprising, you know, we didn't realize that, you know, fires would be involved in the hurricane. I'd never thought fire.
The first call came in probably just before 7 o'clock, and within minutes, the smoke started billowing our way. You could see the wind ripping, and down here in Breezy Point, the homes are very, very close. We know it only takes one house to go up before there's a chain reaction. Our fire trucks, our ambulance, our command vehicles, everything's underwater. So really at that point, we knew we were kind of sitting ducks. We were pretty much useless.
As a trained professional, it's hard to sit still and do nothing. I waited about an hour just to see if there was any emergency service response, which I kind of knew there wouldn't be. And I couldn't just sit still. I made a decision to start out for that fire. The goal was to try and notify people that this fire is not going to be controlled. and make them understand that it's time to go. I gotta give my wife a lot of credit. Being 3 months pregnant and going through this experience with her 2-year-old son and then watching me go out the door, she held it all together. And I knew they were in a pretty secure place, and I knew at that point that the fire wasn't gonna get to them, just the way it was moving. When I left my parents' house, the water was chest deep outside. It took about 45 minutes to get over a half a mile, so I had a real good vantage point to watch this thing as it progressed. It was literally going along the rooftops and burning the homes from the top down. This thing was moving so fast. You had hurricane-force winds, you had water, you had fire, and it was clear this was not gonna stop.
As we continue to cover Hurricane Sandy, we're getting a lot of images into our newsroom. And there's a situation in Queens right now, a 6-alarm fire reportedly destroying more than 50 homes.
In a natural disaster that involves rain and wind and lots of water, the last thing a lot of people here in Queens thought about was a fire, but that's exactly what broke out in this community.
We could see the fires, and we knew that that was serious. I'm trying to be calm for my in-laws. They're elderly. It was just waiting and watching and wondering, was it coming to us? How are they going to contain this fire?
The glow was just getting bigger and bigger. But we started to see people shining flashlights from the path of the fire, trying to get our attention. That's when myself and 4 other firefighters I was with, we decided we were gonna launch one boat and we were gonna make paths into the fire and get as many people out as we could.
When I got to the fire zone, my own block, I heard people calling for help through the smoke, and my heart sunk, and these were my neighbors. And they had stayed just like I did, but I don't think they realized how fast that fire was moving. When I told people it's time to go, they looked at me in horror.
No FDNY, no volunteers for well over an hour. We got like a 3rd alarm going here. We are in serious trouble here.
New York University Medical Center on the east side of Manhattan has lost its power and its backup systems. Some of its patients, including pediatric critical care patients, all being evacuated at this hour.
I told my wife, we have to go to the hospital. We have 74 kids. Let's see what's going on. The elevator was shut down, so we have to run up 15 floors.
We lost the light and the monitors shut off. Everybody was using their cell phone to assess the babies. We just had to be thinking on our feet.
How do we evacuate a pediatric floor? That's major. The stakes are high, the risks are high, and the chances of something going wrong is very high.
By the time Jeremy was making the decision to walk to the hospital, that was nerve-wracking because there was no power. You looked out and it was black. It was pitch black out the windows. And that's a really weird situation in Manhattan, to have it dark.
I started my trek through New York City, and it was this very dystopian feeling of walking down 34th Street with no people around, and the wind is whipping the trees and rain is pelting. And I just had to keep pushing forward and soaked to the bone, but continuing to just try to get there. I rounded the corner and saw the hospital, and the first thing that stood out to me was just the flashing ambulance lights. I was looking down First Avenue, and there was just ambulance after ambulance as far as the eye could see, lined up at the hospital, and I'm seeing gurneys roll by with very intensively needy patients. It was like nothing I could have ever imagined, seeing an emergency unfolding before my eyes. At that point, it was clear we were facing something no one had prepared for. And I'm just feeling this drive to go find my son.
I was worried about Bob because I hadn't heard anything from his vehicle. It felt like eternity before help got there. The first thing I heard was the residents coming outside, yelling to each other, I think they're dead. I think they're dead. And I'm like, no, we're not dead. Or at least I'm not dead.
One of the first things I noticed pulling up on scene was that this large tree that came down across the street had also brought with it just about every power wire.
I have multiple wires down. They're on top of the cars.
The only thing you could see through this mess of tree trunk were the headlights from John's car. I had no idea where underneath the tree the police car was. I couldn't even see it. I found out that it was Bob in this police car, and that hit me very personally at that point. There's a lot of things that are running through your mind when you're the incident commander of just any incident, let alone now it's people that you know. And you're looking at this whole scene going, what is the risk versus reward? And was there a high risk? Absolutely, there was a high risk. There were power wires down, but I also had 2 people that I knew that one was very much alive, and it was our responsibility to get them out.
About midnight or so, I heard the bang at the door. It was 3 knocks, and hard knocks, like just loud. So I got up and I walked to the door and I opened it, and there's 2 police officers standing there. And they were looking at me and they were like, "Can we come in?" And they said, "Your dad's been in a really bad accident." Then I got really scared. I just wanted to see my dad.
Winds are still very strong and gusty. I look at that fire, of course, with the winds like this, that only exacerbates that problem.
As the night was going on, we were starting to get pictures of things. We got pictures of the fires in Breezy Point, of course. When we saw that massive fire, as the winds were so strong and blowing the fire from house to house to house, it was spreading so fast.
It literally was a firestorm in the middle of a superstorm. To my knowledge, nothing like this has ever happened before.
We knew this fire was going out of control. We didn't have the equipment with us at that point to fight a fire. So we decided to use one boat to start pulling people out, going door to door, whatever we can. As we're traveling down the streets, you see the people in their window, and they're banging on the window. You could see the fear in their face. They knew they made a bad decision. And especially when you see people in the window with children, you know that they regret that decision. Very scary situation for them.
I'll never forget the feeling of being so helpless. We have no lights, power's out. We could see the flames nipping from the upstairs bedrooms. We're so close to the bay. Something could happen where we could lose the house. Who knows what else is going to happen at the rest of the night.
411 headquarters. We got units on scene right now. We're operating to extricate both the officer and the firefighter from the vehicles. We have live wires with our officers trapped in the vehicles. Cut the grid.
Every firefighter that was on that scene that night knew that there were dangers of being out there that night. Mark McGrath was on the rescue truck. He looked at me and he said, "I'm gonna go and see if I can make contact with the police officer."
He is best friends with Bob, and Mark was in between our vehicles talking to Bob and trying to get him out.
Before I got to him, I was pretty sure that he was dead. When I got closer to the window, I could see that he was breathing, and he was moving, and he was trying to speak.
We're entangled in wires trying to get the people out of the vehicle.
The initial reports that I was getting from under the pile were not good ones. They were saying that he was having a real hard time breathing, that the tree was compressing down on his neck. They said he was turning pale.
He was saying that he felt numb and that he couldn't move anything, so I knew that that was a serious injury that he had.
They started working on my vehicle, and they were able to reach in and pull me out.
The assistant chief has been extricated from the vehicle. He's en route to the hospital. We're working on a police officer.
Once we had the door off and could get a full assessment of Bob, he was responding to me until at one point I said, "You all right, Bob?" And he didn't respond.
Give me a backboard.
He wasn't doing well, and time was of the essence.
I have the jaws in, and we're cutting the car. We need to expedite this, you understand?
I couldn't get hold of Jeremy. The cell phones weren't working. I wanted at the time to be able to get in touch with him and to just say, are you there? Did you make it? And I didn't know.
It's not easy to find your way into a hospital that is actively being evacuated. There's a lot of people telling you no one's going in here. There was no budging from these security guards and police officers outside, but there were a few nurses that had come outside for a smoke break and heard my pleas and said, I'll go up to 15 and see if I can get someone to come down and bring you in. For 2 hours, I stood outside watching as gurneys rolled by with babies and nurses holding tiny infants, pumping oxygen bags and helping them to get to the next ambulance and the next ambulance and the next ambulance. And I'm looking as intensely as I can for my son to be one of those infants being carried out. Finally, a doctor came down and said, are you Mr. Donovan? I said, yes, yes. And he's like, come with me. And the two of us sprinted up 15 flights of stairs. That moment of hope and sort of breakthrough was as happy as you can be in the midst of a crisis like the one we were experiencing. I just felt like I had a chance.
The power outage in parts of Manhattan has forced the NYU Langone Medical Center to evacuate approximately 215 patients. Those patients are being transferred to other nearby hospitals.
I finally find a way inside the hospital with the doctor. Arriving to that floor with no lights was really terrifying. At that point, William was on all sorts of monitoring and pumps for his medication and those things that require electricity.
The stakes are very high for premature infants that have to be transported when there's no electricity, because we can't regulate their temperatures with the equipment that we normally have. Oftentimes they need respiratory support and also cardiovascular support.
So we assemble a team for each child. Each patient has about 5 or 6 people around them.
And at that point, bursting through the door was a group of people carrying several babies, and I ran bodily into our son's nurse, holding William. She said, Mr. Donovan, we found you, this way. My son and the other babies from the floor were in one big cluster of nurses and doctors and heroes that were helping them down 15 flights of stairs and keeping their IV bags close and keeping them on monitors. You would count steps aloud, and you were slowly, carefully bringing these incredibly delicate babies down this long flight of stairs. I'm holding an IV pole, and we would say, okay, next step, next step. It was suffocating in its intensity and suffocating in the closeness that we all had to keep with each other.
I can't imagine what the doctors and nurses were going through that night. Everybody was just willing to give so much of themselves and stay multiple shifts and not go home. So the physical exhaustion, the emotional exhaustion, I can't even imagine that.
When we got down to the first floor, there were a ton of critical care patients just lining the walls waiting for their turn to be called. Every non-intensive patient had already been evacuated. The only people still in that hospital were the most critical patients. And then the fear factor is saying, okay, how long are we going to be waiting here?
In the Breezy Point area, some evacuations, some rescues going on there. We also understand that some rescue swimmers are going into those submerged homes. They're all volunteers, no assistance from the city.
I continued to search houses until literally my jacket caught fire, and I was able to remove a fair amount of people, and they made it out safely. I didn't go into my own house till the very end. I ended up having to kick my own door in. I had gone upstairs to my bedroom to recover a few things, and while I was up there, the fire breached the front windows of the front room on the second floor, and I had to go down the stairs head first just to get away from it. I just couldn't believe this was going on in my own house. I knew in my heart my house was going to be gone.
My husband came home in the middle of the night to check on us. When he came in, I'll never forget his face. He just knew how bad it was out there. He just was like, it's just bad all over. We just never knew what we were going to face the next day when the daylight came.
Flight Drive West Command headquarters and an update. We're still extricating the officer from the vehicle. The power is still live to the area here.
Bob is in this police car. The weight of this tree is sitting on his head and on his neck. I'm being told that he's not breathing well. He's turning pale. We knew it was a life or death situation at that point to get him out.
He stopped responding to me. I was fearful that, we had lost him.
Mark is the one who kind of just made the call. He's like, Bob, this is what we're doing. We're just getting you out of here at this point.
Didn't know how death felt, but in my mind, I had settled the fact that this is how someone dies. The numbness feeling, that pins and needles feeling, started at my toes and slowly worked up my whole body. I was almost shocked at the fact that I'm still alive. Mark just kept telling me, I got you, pal. I got you, pal. One of my best friends is cutting me out of this car, and his voice of constantly saying, I got you, pal. I got you, pal, kind of resonated with me. I couldn't move from my neck down, so that became some difficulty for Mark to get my legs out from underneath the now crushed dashboard that was on top of them. I remember him getting my legs out, and he said, let's go. And out of the car I came. Got me strapped to this backboard, put me in the ambulance, and got me out of there. I was rushed into surgery. After surgery, I woke up in the recovery room, a lot of commotion going on.
When I first walked into the room, he's just laying there flat. His body's just limp. You can tell that he couldn't move anything in it, and it was scary. It was really scary. I started crying and crying. My dad was always a strong person. My dad was always my personal bodyguard. And seeing him in this vulnerable state, I just broke down.
A tending physician arrived with a group of medical students and instructed them that this patient probably will never walk again. My eyes kind of flew open. That was the first time I actually heard this from a medical professional. Am I going to be paralyzed the rest of my life? What does this look like moving forward?
I remember him crying and being really angry about it. And he's like, I am going to walk out of this hospital. And that was his goal.
When I got out of the house, I couldn't see anything and I couldn't breathe. The smoke was just ferocious. It was at the point where you couldn't do anything any longer. I thought about the things that meant the most to me in the world, and I said, I'm not going to allow this to be my last stand. What would any of this be for, to try and help other people, if I couldn't help myself and then be there for my family in the aftermath? And I ran as fast as I can, and thank the Lord I was able to get out of that area. When I got back to my parents' house, my wife was waiting there, and I just told her, it's gone. It's all gone. And I think that's when it really all hit me.
We pulled approximately 30-something people out of the path. After the water receded a little bit, you could see the devastation that had happened down here just from the water. The fire was going to be a whole other disaster. You knew this was going to be a life-changing moment for everybody.
Thank God nobody was killed during that fire in Breezy Point. I know that other areas weren't so lucky, and we're all forever grateful. The next morning, I went to see what happened to my house. And everything we had worked for the first 40 years of our lives collectively was gone. And you're starting to deal with that reality. You had approximately what turned out to be 111 homes, and families are now starting from scratch.
It looked like the apocalypse. People were anxious, crying, dirty. You just felt like you were living in another world. When I got home, there was like 2 feet of mud. You didn't know where to start, but Breezy is resilient. We are a special group of people, and one by one, everybody got back and tried to help each other to rebuild our homes.
As hurt as people were, we knew in our hearts that however long it took, we were going to come back and make that neighborhood even greater.
So we just got some information in as well that they're trying to move patients from the NICU and other units down several flights of stairs.
When we got down to the first floor, because of the intensity of need, we're brought to our ambulance pretty promptly, and we started driving across New York City.
The morning after, finally, Jeremy was able to get a phone call through to me, and he said, well, everything went great, but we no longer have a view of the river, we have a view of the park. We got moved to Mount Sinai Hospital.
At 7:30 in the morning, we went to see all our patients in these hospitals. I'm still emotional, because to see these patients safe, with no harm, continue to do well, and to see the reception of the families, we're beyond. And that's why we are in this profession.
There was no loss of life at the hospital that night. And this thing that no one could have predicted happened, and there's no handbook, and no loss of life is staggering. I mean, there's so many people that work together to make sure that I have this 12-year-old boy that I have now, who I love so much.
This one right here?
William is a bundle of energy. He loves life, he plays soccer, basketball, baseball. We laugh that we don't know what he would be like if he had a full heart's worth of energy, because it would be hard to contain that boy.
The fact that we went through some hardship and we experienced these sort of crazy circumstances lets us really value every day that we spend together.
This storm was blamed for at least 181 deaths, the majority of those in New York and New Jersey. I have always been proud to be a New Yorker. I was never more proud than after Superstorm Sandy, to see how people rallied, how people pitched in, and people really came together to help. We're pretty resilient, we're pretty tough. And I think you saw that after Sandy.
The tree was wrapped in a live wire. If that wire had arced, it would have killed everyone near that tree. And they didn't leave, and they shouldn't have even really come in for me. Oh, I know when I get these arms working a lot better, some people are gonna get some big bear hugs. When they laid me on the backboard, I couldn't feel anything or move from the neck down. I was paralyzed. For some reason, when I laid on the backboard in a completely flat manner, I could feel something in my spine crushing, where the EMTs realized what I was saying, that I needed to lift my head up. So he put his hand under my head, because the thickness of his hand was exactly what I needed, was a millimeter I needed from not being paralyzed for the rest of my life. For whatever reason, I was spared. those that came to my rescue made sure of that. And it was my job to get back to taking care of them, get back to my job. So I sat on that path, really never looked back.
That was just like a tremendous day. That was, you know, he still had a lot of rehab to do, but to see him walk out of that rehab facility was phenomenal.
My dad's experience made me want to become an ICU nurse and help people that are in their lowest point become the best versions of themselves. To this day, I'm still inspired by his strength, and I get to inspire other people through his story.
For their efforts for the rescue of Bob and I, everybody who was part of that rescue was honored and recognized. One firefighter from our company, Mark McGrath, received a special award from the President of the United States at the White House.
That's what you got to be made of, to dodge live power lines during Hurricane Sandy to free your partner pinned down by a tree, all the while saying, "I've got you, pal."
It was a very proud moment, you know, because Mark accepted that award for a lot of people, not just for himself.
I have some lingering effects of the injury, but as you experience some of these larger events, giving the speech at my son's wedding, preparing to walk my daughter down the aisle and give the father of the bride speech, my first grandchild is on the way. Wouldn't have any of those things if it weren't for these brothers turned into my heroes coming to cut me out. The very firehouse where all my best friends are on the rescue truck. It's crazy to think of it that way.